Hello everyone, I'm Brazen Eagle, and thank you for joining me here. So, today from the Daily Mail, Christmas parties cancelled, written consent for sex and a growing hostility between men and women, and a provocative blast. A female academic argues, yes, it had noble intentions, but it's time we called time on PoundMeToo. Alyssa Milano began PoundMeToo on Twitter to raise awareness of sexual harassment. Joanna Williams says the birthday of the movement shouldn't be celebrated. Author of Women vs. Feminism says PoundMeToo has diluted the meaning of harassment. There's risk of serious assault and knee-touching seen as are equivalent offenses. She argues coverage makes it seem that predators only target the middle class, and Joanna claims the movement has sparked fear into every corner of our lives. Oh, woe is us. So, two small words. That's all it took to create a new religion, one that has sparked witch hunts, ruined reputations, and fostered a climate of suspicion that shows no signs of waning. 2 years ago, actress and producer Alyssa Milano took to Twitter and told her followers, if you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write "Me Too" as a reply to this tweet. A week later, the New York Times had printed an investigation into the then most powerful man in Hollywood, Harvey Weinstein. It accused the movie mogul of being a serial sexual predator who'd been paying off his accusers for decades. Weinstein resigned from his production company days later. But if it were not for Milano's tweet, which the hashtag #MeToo was born, his fall from grace and the ensuing legal case that prompted more accusers to come forward with shocking accusations might have been the end of it. Instead, within a week of Milano's call to arms, PoundMeToo had been used 1.7 million times on social media in 85 countries. Wow, 85! It morphed into a global movement, raising awareness of sexual harassment, and inspired the Time's Up protests. Soon its influence was felt beyond the internet, and the list of victims and the accused grew. Household names such as Bill Cosby, convicted of multiple sex crimes, and Kevin Spacey, who remains under investigation, are just two of them. This month, Prime Minister Boris Johnson came under scrutiny after journalist Charlotte Edwards accused him of squeezing her thigh at a lunch. That's right, 20 years ago, which he denies. Tell me, how is he supposed to prove that? Leading MeToo-ers lauded as the silence breakers on the cover of Time magazine in 2017, boasted that before PoundMeToo, women kept silent about the abuse they suffered. While it is true that the movement had made it easier for women, including Hollywood stars as Gwyneth Paltrow, Angelina Jolie, and Cara Delevingne, plus many thousands more worldwide, to speak about sexual harassment, I firmly believe that its second birthday is not something to celebrate unquestioningly. It may have made some men think twice before behaving like lecherous idiots, but I fear it has also had a ruinous impact on everyday relationships, undermined our centuries-old justice system, and led to the suicide of a British politician. The consequences of any movement. Within days of PoundMeToo going global, I, and along with a handful of traditional feminists, expressed concern about what the movement might become. I hope they're going to bring up hashtag #HimToo. I doubt it, though. After all, it began life on Twitter, which requires users to communicate in 280 characters or fewer. That doesn't exactly lend itself to the nuanced tone required to discuss abuse. That PoundMeToo brings genuine abusers to light is, of course, to be applauded. However, allegations soon became rumor and hearsay, and Twitter's group dynamic, where users often gang up on each other, ensured that often only one response was acceptable: to believe, without question or criticism, the accuser. Forget about delivering justice. In the world of PoundMeToo, the accused are always guilty until proven innocent. That's if any attempt at relying on the law is made at all. As we know in Britain, all too well, assuming that anyone accused of sexual offenses is guilty before they have been able to defend themselves can have awful consequences. In November 2017, a month after Milano's tweet, Welsh Government Minister Carl Sargent was found dead at home. He had been accused of inappropriate conduct towards women, and after being hounded by activists, without ever being told the specific details of the claims, took his own life. No one can guess another's mental state, and will never know the full facts of this case. But Had there not been such a climate of hysteria, it is possible that his wife, Bernadette, would still have a husband and their children, Jack and Lucy, would still have a father. So far, PoundMeToo has resulted in sex abusers being exposed, but also ruined the reputations of innocent men. It has harmed women too, because that's all this author cares about. For PoundMeToo activists have made their definition of sexual assault so trivial that vulnerable victims who have suffered greatly, genuinely traumatic experiences are undermined, which is absolutely true, actually. At first, PoundMeToo focused on accusations of rape, but as more and more women spoke out, their allegations ranged from serious criminal offenses to bad or unwanted behavior. In December 2017, Conservative MP Damien Green, who was then the Deputy Prime Minister and Theresa May's right-hand man, had his reputation damaged when journalist Kate Maltby accused him of fleetingly touching her knee when she was a young Tory activist, a claim he has strenuously denied. Across the Atlantic, the campaign of U.S. presidential hopeful Joe Biden was almost derailed after a former politician said he made her feel uneasy, gross, and confused in 2014 when he allegedly kissed her on the back of the head. Now, to be frank with you guys, this was a terrible example to bring up Joe Biden. If you know anything about Joe Biden, you know he's a very creepy individual, and his interactions, especially with younger girls, are very, very questionable. If anything, this article author should have chosen Roy Moore of, Alabama or Mississippi, and how he got Me Too at the last moment. But anyways, in one of the most frivolous cases to go viral, comedian Aziz Ansari almost had his career ruined after a woman he once dated complained online she felt his pattern of behavior was coercive. Among her claims that he left a restaurant too early, poured her red wine instead of white. Oh my god. Red wine? No. And tried to kiss her when her non-verbal cues told him she wasn't up for it. That's right, you must get enthusiastic verbal consent to do anything. In hindsight, it is easy to laugh at how these #MeToo misdemeanors have been blown out of proportion, but it is also deeply concerning for women. For all of these behaviors, rape, flirtation, picking the wrong bottle of wine, oh no, are thrown together under the same banner. It risks giving the appearance that serious sexual assault and knee-touching are equivalent offenses, which, basically, that's true for the consequences, at least. By broadening the definition of sexual assault, which has been happening for decades now, PoundMeToo's proponents have diluted and undermined its very meaning. That doesn't mean, however, that the campaigners regard all victims as equal. Over the past 2 years, we have read a great deal about knees being touched. And you could be forgiven that thinking that sexual predators only target middle-class legs in posh London restaurants, at least if you live in the UK. But this approach has the unintended impact of erasing genuine cases of gross misbehavior, many of which are shamefully and willfully ignored. When was the last time the #MeToo brigade lamented the plight of the working-class girls of Rotherham, Huddersfield, and Telford, some just 11 years old, who were groomed and literally raped by men of Pakistani or Asian heritage? Girls were often passed between abusers. Some were made pregnant, had abortions, and were raped time and again. 3 women were murdered, and 2 others died in tragedies linked to the abuse. It's like almost as if Me Too didn't go after those men for some reason. Of course, the scandalous treatment of these young girls did come to light some years before PoundMeToo was born. But to today's campaigners, do they really think that grooming in these areas has miraculously stopped after a handful of prosecutions? Ever since care home managers in the Midlands warned of child sex rings in the 90s, worrying new cases have continued to come to the surface. In the spirit of Me Too, though, one might expect activists to march through these areas, demanding financial support for the abused girls and their families. But the collective silence of Me Too on this issue is a stain on the proud history of feminism. I wonder why. A century ago, suffragettes, in particular Sylvia Pankhurst, put their lives on the line to fight for the rights of British women at men's expense, including working-class women, to vote, because we love equality of outcomes. Back then, the sisterhood wasn't confined to middle-class activists. It was a universal movement dedicated to serious problems, to strip men of supposed privileges and just give them to women. But now, either Northern girls don't make for such sympathetic victims, or Pakistani heritage men are problematic perpetrators. Whichever it is, there is a shameless double standard at the heart of Me Too. Really? You're just now getting this. How else can we explain the activists' preference for policing the workplace to confronting grooming gangs? which I'll comment on in a little bit. Countless surveys over the past 2 years have been wheeled out to prove that sexual harassment is rife in the office. They make for alarming reading until we dig deeper. Take one study, commissioned by the Trades Union Congress in May this year, entitled Sexual Harassment of LGBTQ LMNOP People in the Workplace. It claims that 70% of the LGBT blah 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 workers have been sexually harassed at work. It's a shocking statistic, absolutely shocking. But if you look at the types of assault highlighted in the study, the most frequently reported form of sexual harassment was a joke. That's right, no more jokes. For the survey's creators, intent on shining a spotlight on sexual harassment even in places where it doesn't exist. It didn't matter if the victim was the subject of a joke or even the intended audience. They may have just overheard a quip shared just once many years earlier. So now fun has been erased in the workplace. Some firms have banned alcohol from work functions, others have vetoed hugging. A handful have even canceled office Christmas parties. Wherever you venture, from your work or your place of work to your local bar, a pungent cloud of suspicion now hangs over every interaction between a man and a woman, especially in the man's head. Me Too's message of fear and distress has spread into every corner of our lives, and it shows no sign of relenting. Almost 2/3 of universities now offer students sexual consent classes in which they are taught that sex is a good thing as long as certain rituals are observed beforehand. Lessons focus on how to seek consent before a sexual encounter and how to know whether or not your partner agrees, unless they actually take away consent a few days later or even the next day. This is an incredibly patronizing development. If any student needs to be taught that rape is wrong, let alone the difference between yes and no, then they certainly should not be allowed anywhere near a university. Worse, in being expected to carry out a formal negotiation process detailing in advance exactly who will do what to whom, where and when, and for how long, embarking on sex becomes terrifyingly overcomplicated. And you know what? It kind of ruins a moment. Forget passion and spontaneity. In a world where young adults can't be left alone to work out how to get someone into bed with them, it's hardly surprising that 1 in 8 26-year-olds today has never had sex compared to 1 in 20 a generation ago. If today's students are tomorrow's parents, teachers, and lawyers, then the university campus offers us a terrible glimpse into the future. Brought to you by communists and those who empower them. It's a world where men and women lead increasingly separate lives. It's a world where women tremble at an unwanted glance and men carry consent forms to protect themselves in case the police are called after a night out. Come on, consent forms mean nothing. It's an unforgiving place where men are tried and found guilty after one mistake or one imagined mistake. Where relationships between men and women, once the bedrock of family and communities, are no longer forged from love and trust but fear. Well, it was never forged from love, if you know anything about history. 2 years is more than enough. We need to call time on PoundMeToo. Well, Dr. Joanna Williams, you don't know your history, and you don't know male and female nature, and the interactions between relatively young and even older people. But anyways, this was quite a long article that details the consequences of #MeToo. And I'm kind of tired of saying Me Too. But anyways, this is an article about it. It's almost as if women didn't realize from the beginning that actions have both potentially good and terrible consequences. Now, like I said, this article is quite long, but, most of the discussions and thoughts about #MeToo, they've already been said. But regardless, there are still a few notable things to bring out about the movement that were brought up in this article. For example, leading MeTooers lauded as silence breakers over down here. On the cover of Time magazine in 2017, boasted that before PoundMeToo, women kept silence about the abuse they suffered. While perhaps a few true victims did come out, which is, not a bad thing, the term abuse really needs to be looked at. If someone was really abused, then he or she needs to come out and tell others about it immediately and not wait 5, 10, or even 20 years to accuse a man of a supposed crime. You can't prove a negative. Someone accused Boris Johnson, who I think looks weird, but that doesn't matter. Someone accused him of squeezing her thigh 20 years ago. How is he supposed to prove that? How? Now, of course, the author's term of a traditional feminist. regardless of identifying yourself as a traditional feminist or not, this author, Joanna Williams, and pretty much all Western women, I would say at least 99% of all Western women, are feminists to some degree. All of them, at least most of them, the very huge, vast majority of them, they benefit from feminism, and even if women say they aren't feminists, they still enjoy the fruits and the labor of feminism. When was the last time a woman said she wasn't a feminist and also said, "Take my rights and privileges away"? Your supposed traditional feminist now realizes that the PoundMeToo movement is taking away some of women's advantages in the workplace and in the world of relationships. And they are now somewhat, but not fully, regretting the consequences of their actions. Now, the author is also correct in stating that the PoundMeToo activists have made their definition of sexual assault so trivial that vulnerable victims who have suffered greatly or suffered genuine traumatic experiences are undermined. Someone says that they have been a victim of sexual assault, right? Now, for me at least, I have to ask myself or ask the person if this is a real account of sexual assault or is this just a made-up accusation. You just don't know nowadays. It's like someone saying they were raped. Like, was it like legit rape? Like, is it like real rape? Or is it just like someone bumped into you in the hallway? You don't know. Of course, nowadays, like I said earlier, PoundMeToo has hurt both sexes, and that's what the author's attempting to get at. But really, she only cares about women because PoundMeToo ultimately hurts women more than men in the long run. You know why? Because men don't want to get involved with females, because men know that anything that could upset a woman could land them in the unemployment line, out of a job, of course, socially ostracized, or even worse. You can get falsely accused of rape or sexually assault without even knowing a female. She could literally go on Facebook or wherever she has, find some guy's name and say, "He sexually assaulted me. If you don't believe me, I can give you evidence." Now, this traditional feminist also states that, in hindsight, it is easy to laugh at how these PoundMeToo misdemeanors have been blown out of proportion, but it is also deeply concerning. For if all these behaviors, rape, flirtation, and picking the wrong bottle of wine, are thrown together under the same banner, it risks giving the appearance that serious sexual assault and knee touching are equivalent offenses. You know, like I said earlier, it's like studies saying that a quarter of all college campus females have been sexually assaulted or raped. But when in reality, that phrase includes other things like accidentally touching an elbow or bumping into someone accidentally. You know, the numbers are conflated to look like there's a serious problem going on. It's telling a false narrative. But now, there's a very interesting thing that this author does bring up that most people really haven't brought up, especially in the UK. But when was the last time the PoundMeToo Brigade lamented the plight of the working class girls of Rotherham, or Huddersfield, and Telford, some just 11 years old, who were groomed and raped by men of Pakistani heritage? Girls were often passed between abusers, some were made pregnant, had abortions, and were raped time and again. 3 women were murdered, and 2 others died in tragedies linked to the abuse. This is very honest and very factual. It's the most damning thing about Me Too in our society. It's almost as if the men accused from Me Too were the type of men that could either not fight back or wouldn't do anything to the accuser. There's a reason why those minority rapists get away with their crimes in the UK. It's because they will hurt you or even kill you if you do anything like #MeToo to them. Your regular Western guy will take it on the chin because he's too nice compared to those minority people in the UK. Now, I'm sure we have the same problem here in the United States, but this is an example in the UK. Women decided to not go against these minorities because those women most likely would have been targeted by them and harmed. By attacking Western men, these women knew that they were safe in doing so. Instead, of course, like I said, they decided to go after your comparatively nicer Western men and ruin their lives instead. It's a shame that men in Western society can't organize together and put a stop to this. But the article, of course, further goes on and states that the workplace has changed. Men are now avoiding women. It's too bad that this author doesn't understand at the very, very end of the article that consent means nothing. It really means nothing in the long run. A female can give consent, can give you verbally enthusiastic consent, but then the next day take it away and say she was raped or sexually assaulted, and then you end up in jail, or you might commit suicide because of that, just because a female lied. Consent means nothing coming from a female. Regardless, women have now made their bed, and they can lie in it alone until some men, hopefully, maybe, actually organize and do what is right to stop things like this from happening. But until then, thank you very much for watching. I'm Brazen Eagle, and I hope you have a great, great day.